Hi everyone, this is the first of many videos where I will go into using AWS IoT Greengrass and how we get a device connected to IoT Greengrass. I'm going to start with a Raspberry Pi device, so something that's very accessible and everyone can use. So I've got one of those set up on my desk here. So the first step I'm going to do is take the SD card out and we're going to put Raspbian on this device using the SD card imager from Raspberry Pi. So if we go on to the Raspberry Pi website, we can see that we can download this. I'm using Windows, so I'll download for Windows. Raspberry Pi imager. Okay, that's the software installed. So I'm going to open the Raspberry Pi imager. Prompting me now. There it is. So I'm going to install the desktop version of the Raspberry Pi software. The reason I'm doing this is so I can do a virtual desktop to that device, and then I can share that on the screen a lot easier, so you can see exactly what's going on the device. And I'm also going to develop the code on the device first of all, and then deploy that using AWS IoT Greengrass to other devices that we have. So we can do all our test and development on the actual Raspberry Pi device itself, and then push that code up to the cloud and then redeploy that back down to all of the other devices. I'm going to choose the SD card now that I inserted. It's a big one. And then write that. Yes, everything else is going to be lost. That's fine. Okay, that's finished. Now I'm a little bit older. I wish I hadn't have picked a 200 gig SD card. So I'll click continue. I'll just eject that so that I can... it's ejected it already. That's great. So I can pull that out. And I'm going to insert the SD card back into the Raspberry Pi and connect a keyboard and monitor to that at the same time so that I can set that up on the other device. I use a wireless keyboard and trackpad, so I just pop USB in for that and connect HDMI. It'll always be the opposite way to the first way. Okay, and then I can power that on. And use the tactical blue tack to hold it in place. So the reason I have this camera on the device is because we can integrate later on using the GPIO pins on the device to actually get it to control some LEDs and integrate some switches. Okay, so this is the view of my monitor. Sorry, the picture quality is not the greatest, but we won't need this for long. So in here, I'm going to just set up the country, it's UK, British, create a password. Yeah, I don't care about that. I'm going to skip the wireless because I'm going to plug in this in. I'll do the software updates later. Set up the preferences in the configuration. I'm going to enable VNC. So doing that, we should see the VNC logo appear at the top right, up here. So now if I switch back to my other monitor, I should be able to connect to this device. So now the device is connected and I've created a username and password and enabled VNC, I should be able to connect from my machine to the Raspberry Pi. So the IP address T. Yeah, I continue. Username was Pi, password So when I set. So the next step is to install Greengrass on the device, which I can do using the remote desktop window that I'm using now, and get that connected. So first of all, we're going to have to set up an AWS IoT account and the IAM credentials that go with that. So now I'm going to switch to my AWS account. You can see this is a brand new account. So the first thing I'm going to do is select the region closest to me, which is in Europe, Ireland. And then I'm going to go to the Greengrass service. From here, you can see the getting started on the left-hand side. And I'm going to set up one core device. So in step 3, you can see the various parts that we need to run through. So we need to install Java on the device because Greengrassv2 runs on Java. Then we need to configure some AWS credentials on the device. The reason we need these credentials is to set up Greengrass itself and provision the device onto the AWS account. So we'll run through these 2 steps now before we run through the installer and do those parts. So we're going to set up one core and scroll down. So install Java on the device. So let's just check to see if the device has Java already. So we'll go back to our remote desktop, open a terminal, just check Java. Okay, command not found, so we don't have Java on this device, so we'll need to install that. And sudo yes. Okay, that's finished, so we'll just check the Java version that we got. Okay, that's excellent. We'll go back. The next step is to create the IAM user that will let the device provision from the device to the AWS IoT cloud. So we're going to go into Identity Access Management, IAM, and create a user. I'm going to call this user Greengrass Prov for provisioning. We only need programmatic access because it will be using the CLI to provision the device. So we need to tick that, and we can attach the policies directly because we know which ones we're going to need. So we need IAM full access in order to create the token service. We need S3 because we can use that later to create buckets in the deployment. We need IoT to create the device. There's a lot more IoT ones, full access, and we need to add Greengrass. Greengrass full access. So we don't need to tag. So there's our 4 managed policies. We'll create that user. And then we need to store these access keys for later. So I'll download the CSV and save that, and we can use that on the device to provision. So that's done. So I can close that and go back to the Greengrass service. Okay, so we'll scroll down and configure AWS credentials on the device. So we need to put the access key ID and the secret access key that we got earlier from the other account and put those on the device before the device tries to connect and provision itself. Okay, so we're going to name the device, Wi-Fi. The group will be called Wi-Fi group. We need to configure the AWS credentials on the device. So these are the credentials that we had from earlier. So I'll copy those, paste those into the terminal now. Then we can download the installer. Okay, now we'll run the installer. Okay, so that's finished installing now. Everything went okay, as you can see. So we can now go back into our IAM management console, and for that user, we can just disable that user because we don't need to leave that open anymore. You can alternatively use temporary credentials, which we can cover in another video. So I'm just going to go into that user and under the security credentials, make that access key that we created earlier inactive for now. Okay, so that's done. So now if we switch back to the Greengrass console, we should see in there that we now have a Greengrass device connected. So that's the Raspberry Pi, and it's showing it's healthy, so we can do our first remote deployment to the device. So if I select that device, we can go to deployments and we see deployment for my Pi group. In there we have our current deployment, which only has this one component, which is the AWS Greengrass CLI. So I'm going to revise that and add a few components that I will cover in later videos, what each component does. If there are any of these components that you're interested in knowing more about, please just put that in the comments and I'll pick that up and move those up the list to make those videos quicker. But for now, we will add, let's just add the debug console, because that'll be useful if I can find it. It's here somewhere. Let's filter by name. There you go, local debug console. So next, 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 and deploy. So we should see that deployment happen successfully to the device. So we can look in this IoT job and see how the deployment is going and if the device has picked up that job yet and carried out the actions. Currently it's in progress, so that should update. Okay, so now that's deployed, we'll switch back to the device. And there's a few commands we can use locally on the device. The local Greengrass CLI. So that first command is to get the component list of the components running on that device. So we'll run that command and we'll just check to make sure that the extra component that we added, which was the local debug console, has been deployed and is running. So you can see here that's been deployed and it is running, and I can see some of the other parameters around that device. So that's it for this video. We have Greengrass up and running on the device, and we can now communicate and do deployments to that device. For the next video, we'll focus on creating some code that interacts with the real world. But if there's anything I missed or you would like me to do another video on or focus on, please put that in the comments and I'll add that to the series. Thank you very much.